all are having a wonderful beginning of the Sabbath on today. Of course, tonight is Friday Night Live. Of course, we discuss so many different topics about different things that people are interested about. Well, tonight, we're going to do something a little bit different. But before we get started, just a couple of announcements for you. Of course, things kick off tomorrow with our Sabbath school at 9:30 a.m. with our adults on the conference call. 10 o'clock a.m., things move on to our young adults on the Zoom call. And then we have our children's Sabbath school at 11 o'clock a.m. So we are fully stacked and ready for Sabbath school. But guess what? And then we got divine worship at 12:30 p.m. And of course, this Sabbath is in Isaiah 58 Sabbath. So it is sure to be a blessing. Of course, come on now. We're going to be, giving out clothes and giving out jackets and pants and feeding the homeless and going to the police and fire station. We're going to be everywhere. So come join us. Invite a friend, invite a family member as we go and we do service on Sabbath. It may be a little bit cold, but we're not afraid of the cold weather because God has sent us to go and help somebody else. Amen. And of course, there will be no Sabbath snack because it is an Isaiah 58 Sabbath. But Sabbath snack will return next Sabbath as Pastor Jackson begins the sanctuary. Talking about the sanctuary. It is sure to be a blessing, y'all. Y'all, when you study the sanctuary is an awesome topic about how God is placing his plan of salvation in a way for mere mortals, human beings, mere flesh, to understand how he saves us from sin. Again, the sanctuary, there's sure to be a blessing. But hey, y'all, we're going to go ahead and get started with this Friday Night Live. And so tonight, we're going to do things a bit different. We're going to do a rerun of one of our previous Friday Night Lives that was such a blessing to a few people, or to a lot of people, actually, because, of course, during this time, we know a lot of people who are going through loss of family members, loss of friends, and people who, of course, around this time of the year, it's almost the holidays in November and in December, may start feeling what I believe psychologists or psychiatrists call tropical depression. That's meteorology. But they experience seasonal depression. Of course, we know that the sun is setting earlier and earlier, and people aren't getting that vitamin D from the sun that they would usually get. And it's causing us to feel probably a little bit more blue than we would like to feel. And so, of course, we just wanted to bring back this Friday Night Live when we were talking about recovery and resilience. Recovery and resilience. We invited a great psychiatrist to come to talk to us about how we are able to become, to be resilient and to recover from all of the things that life throws our way. And so we're going to start with the word of prayer, and then we're going to get started with our rerun of recovery and resilience. Bow your heads with me. Father God, oh Lord, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for your holy Sabbath, oh Lord. And we are asking, oh God, as we review back, oh Lord, the things that we have learned, oh Lord, about being resilient and knowing how to recover from life's battles. Father, I pray that it may continue to be a blessing to all of us watching today. Father, we thank you for all this and more. In Jesus' name, amen.
Accurate to call it brain broken, given the role the brain plays in grief. As your brain adjusts to the loss of someone you love, you might feel numb, depressed, or foggy. But moving through the stages of grief is natural and healthy. It helps you process your loss and begin to move forward over time. This is Your Brain On, where we explore how the world affects our brains and ourselves. The experience of grief is twofold: the immediate acute pain of the loss and the months afterward as you mourn. The loss of someone meaningful functions as a stressor, triggering the pituitary gland at the base of the brain to produce adrenocorticotrophin, or ACTH. ACTH sends a signal to the adrenal gland to release cortisone, a stress hormone. Unlike, say, a temporary threat, grief is an intense, persistent stressor, so your body remains flooded with cortisone. That can cause your immune system to falter, making you feel run down. This is likely why some bereaved spouses fall ill soon after their partner dies. Even if the death of your loved one was expected, the actual event can still feel like a shock to the system. In the short term, a traumatized brain is bottom-heavy, meaning primitive areas, including the fear center, are overactive, adding to feelings of stress and despair. Meanwhile, higher cortical areas of the brain are underactive, like the anterior cingulate cortex, which helps regulate emotion. You may find it difficult to let go of minor annoyances or experience symptoms like increased heart rate for several minutes after you're startled. However, over time, the initial shock of the loss typically gives way to a deep sadness or depression as you continue to mourn. Depression can cause widespread changes across several parts of the brain, including the amygdala, which regulates sleep behavior and mood, and the hippocampus, which processes memory and regulates stress hormones. These changes disrupt core functions of our bodies and minds. As you grieve, you may find yourself sleeping too little or too much, forgetting things, or trapped in a brain fog. These feelings are difficult, but the acute pain doesn't last forever. Eventually, the sadness begins to lift at least a little bit, and then you may move on to feelings of anger or guilt before slowly moving toward acceptance of the loss. Experts agree the bereaved follow their own individual timelines, but in general, this 3-stage process usually takes about a year. There are steps you can take to feel better as you go through the grieving process. Talk therapy can be a major help. This might be group bereavement meetings or cognitive behavioral therapy, which can redirect negative thoughts. Aerobic exercise can improve mood, memory, and thought processing. Talking with friends about the person you lost can be a great comfort too. Studies show long-term grief actually activates neurons in the reward centers of the brain. And recalling the time spent with those who have died reminds us that the memories still live on.
Welcome again to our Friday Night Live. We have Dr. Williams here who's with us today.
Good evening.
And so thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, we want you to know that you can call in at 901-930-6215 as we would allow questions for the doctor today. That's 901-930-6215. And essentially our subject today is simply recovery and resilience. So Dr. Williams, just tell us a little bit about you first as we introduce you to our audience, who's it's not just in Memphis, but it's in the United States and outside of the United States. So just let folk know who you are.
All right. Well, good evening. And I am a licensed professional counselor. I actually have a PhD in a different discipline. And however, I am also a certified trauma specialist, currently working for one of our hospitals, Baptist Hospital, in what's called the EAP group, which is the Employee Assistance Program, where we do counseling. I'm also an intake assessor and a trainer for mental health.
Well, that's a mouthful right there. So we want to, again, thank you and your husband for joining us tonight on this very important topic.
Yes.
So let me ask this first question before we get into it. Why do you think it is difficult for churches, for employers to deal with the subject of grief?
Well, firstly, oftentimes the negative stigma of having, a disorder, that negative connotation with that keeps people from, addressing it.
Okay.
Those who are, believers, oftentimes find that looks like a sign of weakness. I believe in God, I should be able to get through this. Okay. And it's not to say that lessens your faith.
Right.
And so we're moving into another arena for that. Employers often, don't bring in EAP groups, and we do try to get contracts with companies to provide the service, but it's often, the employees don't, voice that they want it or that it's needed. Or the employer may say, well, they've got their benefits, they can use their insurance.
Wow. I want to add that Dr. Williams is also a Christian.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure you know that. So let's talk about this a little bit. So what's the definition of grief?
So grief, as we had seen on the video before, is that intense distress when we have had an event to happen to us, whether it's expected or unexpected. Grief comes as an emotion that produces more of that distress in the body. And whether it's bereavement, and I do have to say that oftentimes we attribute those feelings of sorrow and extreme sadness and distress when we have the death of a person. But we often see people who present with, grief because they had a divorce or they had a miscarriage, or there are other losses, that occur that also bring on those intense feelings of distress.
And for those of you at home, we will put up different PowerPoints about what the doctor's talking about. She just talked about the different types of griefs in terms of divorce. And so if you can put that up there so you can be able to see it. We want to do this a little bit different today. Usually we just have a conversation. But listen, this is too important not to do it. So as you look at this, you have personal death, terminal illness, divorce, separation, loss of a career, betrayal, child leaves home, empty nester. Really?
Yes.
Empty. Well, the reason I'm saying that is my wife and I are empty nesters. So
My goodness.
we was talking about today. We don't have grief. I'm probably more happier than she is, but okay. We'll go empty nesters, loss of a friendship, relationship, family division, even death of a pet.
Yes.
Wow.
There have been people that have struggled with that because the pet, which gives unconditional love, is seen as a family member. And when that pet passes away, or they have to, have them euthanized, that is traumatic to them. And the loss is such that it takes them a while to get over that.
So in the back, we were talking, I was talking to your husband and you. Oftentimes, church members may say, just pray about it, which is cliche, and you'll be all right, as though people are not praying about it. Why do you think that is not the best advice when someone's grieving? I mean, it's good, but it's not the end all.
Right. We mean well. Oftentimes, we don't really know what to say. And therefore, we reach back to those cliches. And in that moment, the person is in so much pain emotionally that sometimes they become angry because they're like, well, if you think about Job and his friends, what they were doing to him, you must have done something. So the message you're saying to them is, pray about it. Well, I've been praying. And so let's try something different. Yeah.
So it's not unusual for people to go in a dark place when they're grieving.
No. As a matter of fact, oftentimes I say they unplug, but what they do, they isolate, go within, which makes the grief even darker and deeper. So we struggle with sometimes depressed mood, which is situational. For example, if you were to go in and something, you had lost something. You're sad for a moment about it if it was something of value, but you get over it. Depression is different. Depression is like a spiraling effect, and it will be a loss of appetite, a loss of interest in anything, feeling hopeless or worthless. It leaves a person where they don't want to do anything. They don't have the energy to do anything. They're not motivated to do anything. If you know someone who is like that, then the best thing for them to do, if it's been occurring for 2 to 3 weeks, is that they need professional help. And the video talked about cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy in order to get a person to reframe or change how they're thinking or seeing things.
Now you just hit a hot button there.
Okay?
Here's the hot button you hit. You mentioned go get professional help.
Yes.
Now, you know, statistically, we as black folk, and even as Christians,
Yes.
we don't think we need help,
Yes.
right? So we don't necessarily seek out.
Right.
You know, we rather sweep it under the rug, and if the sun is shining the next day, then we good. But we may have 4 days of down days, three good days,
Right.
and we say we're good. So how do we convince, how do we persuade that it's important to get professional help? Not your pastor per se,
Right.
right? Now, and the reason I say that, there are some pastors who are equipped to deal with situations like that because of schooling.
Yes.
But most of us are equipped for spiritual and theological things.
Right.
Right? So how do we convince people, persuade, get them to realize, look, you need to see someone who specializes in this particular arena?
Right. And it is difficult to convince a person who feels that that's a sign of weakness, as if I can't do things on my own. And what I often tell my friends is that, you know, we've been in this place for a while and I'm worried about you.
Right.
And if you would just try, then let's see what's different, try something different in order to be able to get to a different place in it. And it does take time. Grief is a process.
Say it again. It's a what?
That's right. It's a process.
Okay.
And we got to walk it through. The video was talking about it may take a year.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be sad for a year. You're
Okay.
going to have moments of those ebbs and flows. The waves may come back in again.
Right.
But at least you are making strides. And I want people to see and reward themselves for the progress that they make. I think when they start and they see the progress little by little, they trust then the therapist. And they have to connect with their therapist.
Okay.
There are therapists that incorporate scriptures,
Okay.
especially for those who are Christian faith. If I find that the person that I'm doing an intake on relies heavily on their faith, yet right now I haven't been able to do that,
Okay.
I'll let them know. Well, it sounds as if, you're a man or a woman of faith. Why don't we look at some things that can help
good.
you stand on that faith even
Okay.
more? So you can incorporate that into it.
Okay.
But, there are, some therapists that are not comfortable with the,
Right.
A Christian worldview.
You hit another hot button for me. You said it makes us think we're weak. Help me
Yes.
understand, how is it that a person can view it as being weak when they're grieving? It's a time of sadness, and we all suffer these emotions. So how do we come to the conclusion that I'm weak when it's visible that you're not strong at the moment? But why do we look at it as such weakness instead of looking at that there's a breakdown somewhere?
Right. Well, the stereotypes
Okay.
in society, we don't tell people our
Right.
problems. We can handle that.
Right,
It
right.
shouldn't be that hard. You'll get through it. I got through it. Well, everyone progresses differently. Everyone's on a different journey. And what is not intense distress for one person
Right.
is severe for another person.
Correct.
But they view it as weakness because I can't seem to do it myself. Well, inside of each of us is a limited amount of resources.
Right.
So I try to give them that picture. If I've got a
That's a
different,
good point. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah.
Inside of us is a what?
yeah, it's a limited number of resources.
I'm gonna have to coin that, Doc.
Yes,
Take that.
you can do that.
Brother Williams, you don't mind me taking that from your wife, do you? Listen, let me just pause there. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that saying right there, that in each one of us, there's a limited amount of
resources.
we have.
What God has given us each an amount of skill sets. We can't be anyone else other than ourselves.
Right.
So therefore, when I get to a point and I do not have what I need,
Okay.
I've got to reach out to someone else who has it.
That's good. That's good. And I think if we can paint that picture, it makes it a lot easier.
Yes.
Because we try to be resilient, but resiliency doesn't mean I got to do it by myself.
Right.
It just means I'm not going to give up.
Right.
And so the challenge oftentimes, even when people say, if I can do it, you can do it, I think those individuals still have some issues.
Yes.
Because if they did not, they wouldn't make that statement, because it's a tough process.
It is difficult sometimes, and I know people try to steer away from medication.
Right.
If an individual is to the point that they are feeling so hopeless, so worthless, that
Right.
they are ready to let go of the world and even think about self-harm,
Right.
we need an intervention, even for a temporary time, of medication to stabilize what is right now not there because of the overload of all the distressing chemicals
Okay.
in the body, that they need to have that mood stabilized so they can then hear from the individual on coping skills, learning something different.
Gotcha. So, Doc, I want you to pin that word intervention.
Yes.
I'm gonna bring that back. So the first time I remember the strictness of grief, this is before my grandmother died. There was a friend of mine in high school in my sophomore year. He had came home from a party. He was a track star. His name was Bobby Rice, his mother's only child. And he had came in from a party, and she thought he had been drinking. She put him in the shower, cold shower. It froze his heart. He died. What she did not know is at the party, he had smoked marijuana laced with cocaine. And when she turned on the cold water to his hot body, it crushed his heart. She would go to his grave site every single day and sit there for hours at a time. One of the things I don't remember anybody doing an intervention. I just remember people saying how sad it was, her only child. But I don't recall anyone saying, hey, we need to get Mrs. Rice some help. Because she's sitting there 8 hours a day
Yes.
at the graveyard, at his tomb, talking to him and things of that nature. And I remember it clearly. No one that I can remember offered to her assistance.
Right.
So is it natural or is it unnatural that when we watch people grieve, we kind of step back?
It's the normal is I'll give them their space.
Okay.
I'll step back, out of respect. What they don't need is just to be alone. They need to know that they have a support system, and that's a key word, having a support system.
We're going to pin that one too. We're going to come back to that one.
Yeah, that support system. But interventions will allow an individual to then break out of where they are. And we use all kinds of therapeutic modalities, techniques. I love utilizing and teaching relaxation skills. We don't really know how to relax.
Right.
We don't.
Right.
But those skills that we teach for relaxation.
We may know how to relax, but it's kind of destructive.
Yes.
Right? See, your husband over there laughing.
we
You know what I'm talking about.
We got to be careful
Right.
on which type of relaxing.
Right. But it's destructive. We'll drink too much.
Yes.
We'll smoke too much.
Those are-
We'll party too much.
Right.
We'll have too much sex.
Yes.
So and we think we're relaxing, but
That's not
Right.
the relaxing I meant.
and that's a sign
But-
of grieving too.
Yes.
But we're gonna get this. So we're gonna get into these stages of grief in a moment.
Right.
But the other thing I want to ask you is this: how much space should we give people?
Everyone is different.
Okay.
When we reach out to an individual and we see that right then they're just not connecting, we step back, and it's okay. A week may pass, but after 2 weeks, don't just abandon the person.
Okay.
Because when everyone is there, right after the funeral,
Right.
you notice everyone is around, the person is going to need you. In a couple of weeks, when it all dies down and everyone else has gone back,
Right.
to, their normal life, the individual then suddenly is left in the silence. That's when we need to be checking in, because that
Okay.
2 to 3 week period, we need to make sure that, hey, let's talk.
All right. Listen, y'all, we want you to have some questions for the doc. 901-930-6215. 901-930-6215. So, Doc, let's go through the stages of grief.
Okay.
And so we're going to put them on the screen. Is it 5 or 6 days?
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross
Okay.
coined the 5 stages,
5 stages.
of grief.
So you see them on the screen. If you want to read them, you can. One is denial, anger. We're going to talk about each one separately.
Yes.
Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So
Yes.
these are the stages of grief that you'll see that someone will go through as they're going towards healing.
Yes, and everyone does not go through all of the stages.
Okay.
Some people, if there's been an individual who was diagnosed with, for example, my father, Alzheimer's, you grieve long before the person actually passes away. You are grieving
Okay.
because you're watching them slip away and there is nothing that you can actually do. So your grief is a longer period. So therefore, when they pass away, you may
Okay.
skip that denial phase. You may even skip the bargaining phase. You may be angry, though, or have depression.
Okay.
But, definitely the 5 stages come and go differently for everyone. And they are not linear. We have them listed, in this order, but that definitely is not usually how it goes. We go back and forth between. We
Okay.
feel good,
Okay.
and then we get to acceptance, and then we go all the way back to anger again.
Okay.
So,
Doc, listen, I don't know your pastor, but I'm going to have to steal y'all two from him. I'm telling you, I'm going to have to steal him. I'm loving Brother Williams over there, his response. Like, and I love your information. I might have to steal y'all tonight. All right? You might have to be surrogate members of New Covenant
All
or
right.
charter. We're going to find a
Charter
way
members.
to make you members. All right, we have a question. It
Yes.
says, given we grieve individually, how long is too long to grieve?
all right.
That's a
so
good question.
It is a very good
Okay.
question. When the video started and I was listening to it, it said up to a year. Let me tell you, after that year, you are going to hit what we call milestones. Milestones are remembering that person's birthday, or if you were a married couple, remembering your anniversary.
Right.
And it will bring on trigger,
Okay.
feelings again of,
Right.
of sadness. It could be again, that denial. I can't believe this happened. So you go back through stages. So over time, and we don't have like a specific length of time, everyone as they process through, and I say with someone, a professional clinician, you can come to that term of acceptance and have coping skills that will help you when you do come to those milestones,
Okay.
that you don't have a major setback or major depression.
Right. Okay, good. Let me ask this question before we get into these stages. A lot of couples tend to break up because one is grieving or both may be grieving, whether it's a loss of a child or situations. What do you say to couples to help them try to fight through
Yes.
staying together when one is maybe on the dark side, the other one's like, you need to come out of this thing, it's been far too long.
Right.
What suggestion, what advice would you give couples? Because I've been a part of that, meaning as a pastor, I've tried to counsel folk to stay together in the most critical time, and it just doesn't seem to work sometimes.
All right. So, for better or worse, in sickness and in health.
You're not giving me a cliche, are you, Doc?
So when a couple, when we find a couple and one of the individuals has suffered a loss, maybe the loss of a parent, and they were very, very close to them, the individual lets their partner know, their significant other know that they are there for them. However, when they see that they've got loss of interest, they're not eating anymore. Hey, I really want us to, see someone.
Okay.
And be there with them.
Gotcha.
It's like they can do individual therapy, but couples therapy helps the other partner really hear
Okay.
where their partner is and try to learn coping skills to help them to get better. So it's twofold in that, they can have their partner to do individual work, but the couples work lets them know, hey, I'm in here for the long haul.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. So let's talk about these stages. Then we're gonna show another video. Then we'll jump back into it. So the first stage is denial. Can you explain denial, please?
Yes, denial, pretending as if this can't be happening. No, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow. It's all of those things of trying to block out that initial hit of the news I just got. For example, if someone gets the news that they've got a diagnosis, that's a terminal diagnosis, they too, hit that stage. Death hasn't happened, but, I don't want to accept that. I'm just going to go on rather than get treatment. I don't believe that. So denial is the time when, individuals just kind of block out to avoid the pain.
Okay.
And shut down, this is really happening.
Right. Yeah. So is it up, I'm just going to speak in the third person for a second, or the second person. Is it up to me to help them understand, don't be in denial, or just let the process work itself? Again,
a professional counselor, if we were able to have them to come in, and what we do is have them to challenge irrational thoughts.
Okay.
And therefore, it's almost like having them answer their own question.
Gotcha.
It really did happen.
Right.
Okay, so, if you're here today and you say that, you've been sad, tell me a little bit about what's happened.
Right.
I start from the very beginning. I get their whole story of what has brought them in. And then I circle back around, well, you said you had been sad. And, tell me a little bit about when you grew up. And then you hit that button of, I lost my mother. And it's like, how recently was that? So you get them to come around.
Very good.
To what it is.
So I need to stay out the way then.
Yes.
So the spouse or the support person needs to just stay out the way and just really let the because what we tend to do is like we challenge them in the wrong way.
Yes, and that's it.
Okay.
We need them, the individual, to challenge, those thoughts.
Okay.
The blockage that, those irrational thoughts of, no, they're not gone. They're going to be coming in any minute, and yet bring them back around. Okay. And that would be professional help because we're well-meaning. We mean well.
Right.
But it's counterproductive, and it will actually take them into one of the next stages.
Which is?
So we've got anger.
Right.
And the person lashes out. And you have friendships that are broken up, relationships that are broken up because, you said something. I can't believe you are so insensitive. And then they just lash out. But it's the anger is from the grief. It's the pain.
So here's the question. What are they angry about? Besides the loss, are they angry that they didn't do enough? Are they angry that... Okay.
Yeah. There are a lot of emotions behind that. Maybe I feel guilty because I wasn't there. Maybe we had an argument and that's the last time I saw them. I'm angry because I can't fix it. I can't bring them back and undo what's done. I'm blaming myself, but I'm lashing out at someone else.
Right. Or we get angry that we watch other people and nothing happens to them.
Yes.
But it happened to me.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Then our third one is?
So we've got, for our third one is bargaining. Okay, if anyone has ever had, if you'll do this, Lord, then I promise I'm going to go to church. If you'll save, they're bargaining.
Right.
And then when it doesn't come through, they jump back to angry, being angry. But bargaining is our way of hopefully, I can negotiate my way out of what is really happening.
Okay. Like what, for example? I mean, how do we bargain in grief, though? Is it, what does that look like? If you eat then I won't talk about, is that part of the bargaining? Or what's a tangible that we can look at that looks like bargaining?
One thing that comes to mind is maybe a child who's not wanting to let go of a parent.
Okay.
And so they're like, Mom, just hang on, they'll try to fast forward some future events.
Gotcha.
And say, oh, we've got this coming up, or,
I got you. That makes it clear. So someone says, Lord, if you let my mother, father live, then I will do X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
It's like when I used to work in the jails, and the guy said, if God lets me out, I'm going to be in church.
I'm going to be right.
And you see him back in jail. I'm like, dude, what
Yes.
happened? Right. I got you.
Yes.
Okay. And bargaining happens a lot.
It happens because we love so deeply.
Okay.
We don't want to let it go, even though
Right.
we know that this is not our home, our final destination. No, I really want to keep them here.
Right. Right. Wow. And then our next stage.
So then we have the next stage of depression. Like I said, we all go through depressed mood. If I were to go in and my supervisor tells me, we're having to close the doors. This has happened to me before. We're closing the doors. So I'm sad.
Right.
I'm grieving over that.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, I'm okay. But depression has a whole different picture in that the sadness is dark. There are thoughts that, I just don't want to go on anymore.
Wow.
When you start hearing people say things, and I'm telling you, for instance, if someone starts giving away things, and this recently happened, they start giving away personal items. They don't say anything in particular. Hey, I thought I'd give you this. Not everyone that's giving away is thinking that
Okay.
way, but they start talking negatively, and everything they say is hopeless.
Right. Can you be a functioning, I'm probably making up a word here, a phrase, a functioning depressed person? Is that?
So there are different types of depression.
Okay.
We have those who have been diagnosed
Okay.
with bipolar disorder, and they run from manic up here.
Now explain what manic is for.
Okay, manic is that they're super active, could stay up 3 days in a row, never have any sleep, just constantly charged, constantly talking. You think they're high on caffeine. But then when they crash, the crash is severe.
Wow, okay.
They don't want to get out of the bed. They don't want to talk to anyone. It's, and they stay that way.
Wow, okay.
So we've got that type of depression. We also have depression could go over a period of at least 2 years. And then, that's a special diagnosis.
Right.
And sometimes you see that, but, grief in and of itself takes us through those phases. Okay. And then people, I don't think about eating. I don't know. When was the last time you ate? I don't know.
Wow. Okay.
That's when you want to check in.
Right.
If they're not knowing last time they ate, when was the last time they showered?
Get that bad, huh?
Are they unkept?
Right.
Their hair all over, their head. They don't want to dress. They stay in the dark. All the blinds are drawn.
Okay.
Definitely.
Then our last one.
So then we have acceptance.
Okay.
Acceptance is not forgetting about the person, but it is actually a type of resolution. I know this happened. How can I honor their memory? How can I now live in a way that is my new normal without them and still remember the parts without all of the excessive pain and sorrow?
Gotcha. Okay. Wow, okay. So just to recap, we can put it back on the screen what the 5 stages are that we just talked about. We have denial, we have anger, we have bargaining, we have depression, we have acceptance. Remember, these are stages of grief, and we need to just learn how to be a support system.
Yes.
So we're going to transition to a short video. Please check this video out as you look at it, and then we'll come back with the doc.
Most people know the common 5 to 7 stages of grief. shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. Everyone experiences these stages in entirely different ways. While you're grieving, many people will tell you something along the lines of, "Stay strong," or "It'll get better." While those are predictable and well-intentioned things to say in an attempt to comfort someone, they're not always true. When I was younger, I experienced more than my fair share of grief. And after years of reflection, I've come to understand that there is more to grieving than most people realize. I would like to share with you 5 things about grieving that I desperately wish someone would have shared with me. 1. We grieve for more than the dead. Yes, the death of a human being is the most common source of grief, but it's not the only one. You can experience the whole force of grief for anything important to you. You can grieve the loss of a pet. You can mourn the loss of a sentimental object, the loss of a beloved place, or of any kind of relationship or connection. Nothing has to die in order for you to go into mourning. There can be grief for a friendship that has just drifted apart, or for the ending of your favorite book series, a home that you've had to move away from. You can grieve for yourself. When you grow and change as a person, pieces can be left behind. Old bits of a personality and mannerisms that we can ache for all the same. Whenever something is lost, no matter what, no matter why, and it causes pain in its absence, that is grief. 2. Just stay strong typically goes hand in hand with the denial phase of grief. It's when you're told that despite all the terrible things happening to you, you must stay strong and overcome it. What is not said is that just stay strong should mean when you're done properly grieving, you will still be alive. This will not kill you. You are stronger than your tragedy. Instead of pretend like nothing's wrong, don't let your tragedy affect you. Just keep living regardless. Denial is usually said to be the first or second stage of grief. If you find yourself stuck there, you will never eventually get to acceptance, and you will never really be out of your cycle of grief. It's okay to not be strong. That's what people should tell you when you're beginning to grieve. It's all right to cry, to scream, to take time away. It's understandable to feel weak for a bit, so long as you learn to let that weakness go. You do not have to stay strong. If you do, moving on may become difficult. Weakness and vulnerability is part of the grieving process, and it should be accepted. 3. There should be a guilt phase of grief. Often when we lose something, those of us that are still here feel a sense of guilt. Some people feel left behind. Some feel survivor's guilt, in which they believe they should also be gone, or should have died in the other's place. Some simply regret what they missed out on before the end. They regret something they said or did, or the lack thereof. We find a way to place the blame on ourselves, find a way to make circumstances our fault, even when it's not. Facing death often precedes a reevaluation of life. It's only natural that we question things in our time of grief. It's normal to find regrets. You're always going to feel like you could have done something. You're not weird or unhealthy to feel a sense of guilt, but you need to learn to let it go eventually. There's nothing to gain from holding on to it. Instead, turn that guilt into nutriment for what is still alive. Learn from your regrets and use them as a guide to ensure that you live the life you have to the fullest. 4. Time means little to the act of grieving. It does not heal all wounds, but merely smooths them over, making it easier to forget their presence. It'll get better is nice, though not necessarily true. And that's okay. There are some things that'll never really go away. Some scars never fade, but that's a fact of life and part of you. It's normal to still be haunted by things that happened long ago, to still grieve years later. Do not be down on yourself for being emotionally caught up in the past sometimes. You can't just ignore trauma and tragedy and hope that it'll go away. Nothing fixes itself. To heal requires treatment, whether that be through outside assistance or internal reflection. Acceptance will not just roll around to you. You have to get there yourself. 5. Acceptance is more complicated than just admitting to a loss. Acceptance is not a finish line. there is no real finish line with grieving, because grief is not a marathon. Rather than a straight shot to the end, it's a winding and confusing maze. Nor is it a one-and-done thing. More than likely, you will find yourself going through the cycle of grief several times throughout your life, and chances are you will grieve the same thing more than once. You can regress, and that's perfectly okay. You could be done with grieving for years when suddenly something triggers you and you have to go through it all over again. This usually happens if you did not let yourself grieve properly the first time, but it can still happen to those that have had the proper closure. We're never really done with grieving. We will grieve for as long as we live. The cycle of grief goes hand in hand with the cycle of life, but that is nothing to be afraid of. In order to accept our losses, we must accept the cycle of grief for all that it is.
Wow, that's a lot there.
Yes.
One thing I was talking to Dr. Williams about was the fact that we're so vulnerable.
Yes.
And it really makes sense why we need God.
Amen.
And because of our vulnerability that we tend to hide, we tend to keep from people. And I understand it to a degree. Some of us have grown up that way. Some have been told, don't show your weakness. But all those things, when you get older, it kind of messes you up because when you need to show your vulnerability,
Right.
it's tough.
Yes.
When you need to show your weakness, it gets hard. When our spouses or our partners need to see it, we don't shed it.
Right.
And so when it comes to death, we avoid it.
Amen.
And we stay in a spot where we're not advancing cognitively or emotionally, and we don't realize it.
Right.
So as we transition, I want to, before we talk about the four R's, let's talk about children for a minute.
Yes.
I think we have another question. Okay, I'm gonna answer this question. The question is, what is the difference between grief and mourning?
And how people look at it, and we use them interchangeably. You know, I may be in mourning, but I'm grieving the loss of,
Okay.
you know, so it just depends on how people in the
Semantics.
context.
It's just one and the same. Okay.
But that's a good question, though.
Yeah, we have another question. How do you overcome relieving, replaying in your mind a loved one that died in front of you?
Okay.
Whew.
I love this question, actually, because as a trauma specialist, we deal with this very tragic situations. So there is a process. It is a therapeutic process. You wouldn't just have your friend go read a book on it, but it's called EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a process by which we move people out in their from the tragic event through their trauma into a healthier sense of where they need to be. It does not erase what happened. Therefore, it only helps to get you to a place that you no longer are triggered by different events that you shut down. It moves you light years through the trauma, though. Where talk therapy is wonderful, but if you are someone who has witnessed, a tragedy right in front of you, that would be a technique that a licensed professional who is certified in EMDR could do.
Okay.
That's a good one. Question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Listen, I want to thank you for your questions. We want you to keep asking. Listen, y'all, we usually go 7 to 8, but this is such an important topic. Doc, if you don't mind, we may go a little bit afterwards.
We're going to keep going.
Brother Williams, can I get your permission? He gives him thumbs up. I'm stealing you, Brother Williams. So just when you get in the car, you and your wife talk, just say, hey, we coming over here on the horn late. We might go a little bit longer because this is a very important issue. And again, we don't talk about it.
Right.
One of my biggest challenges, let me tell you this, the most difficult thing for me as a pastor is not dealing with the ain'ts in the church. It's not necessarily dealing with the folk that backstab you, but it's dealing with death.
Yes.
That's the hardest thing for me as a pastor, is dealing with helping others with death. Because you see the look in their eyes, the sorrow, you see the pain. You see all the emotions wrapped up, and And here you are trying to encourage the discouraged.
Yes.
And it's difficult, to be honest, even at funerals. You know, a lot of people are not paying attention. They're rehashing. I'm talking about family members who are close connected. They're rehashing the loss.
Right.
Some are rehashing, hey, I could have did this, I could have did that. And so it's a difficult process.
It is.
You know, and I know some pastors enjoy it, but I don't. And I know it's part of it, but it's a difficult, trauma is hard.
Trauma is messy.
Right.
Because it is, grief in and of itself, just the death of someone, but to have a tragedy, just makes it so much more intense.
Right.
However, what I would tell you, Pastor, is that when we see the sorrow, when we see people that are grieving and we can't change the situation for them,
right.
I want you to know that what I have heard in counseling sessions from individuals is, but my pastor was there.
Okay.
And see, just your presence,
Gotcha.
even though, there are really no words, I mean, you encourage. They may not remember everything you said that day, but your presence there speaks volumes.
I receive that. And so I'm asking just a little patience tonight because, this is a very tough subject that does not get the attention that's needed. And we have another question. Listen,
Yes.
of all the Friday nights we've done, this is the most questions we've had, which I am glad that people are tuning in and wanting their questions answered.
Yes.
It tells me how important this is.
Yes.
It says, what if you think you are in grief, but unsure what you are grieving from?
All right. So, is it grief or is it sadness from a depression?
Okay.
So then a licensed professional who, when I'm doing an intake, I go from A to Z. I'm going to ask you about everything in that intake. Things you didn't even think you knew.
Okay.
Some questions that will prompt you to say, oh, hadn't even thought about that. I didn't put two and two together on that. So I would recommend that you find a licensed professional, have an intake assessment done. Nothing's, too small or too large. We're there to help and help you to identify what's going on.
Okay.
And where the missing pieces are. So therefore we can help you put those back together in a healthy way.
And again, once again, it's being mentioned, licensed professional help. Not your girlfriend who works as a counselor at a summer camp. Not your boyfriend who talked to the homies on the street and give them good advice.
Right.
But a licensed, professional that specializes in what you're going through.
Right.
I want to emphasize that.
And I appreciate it because, we go through all of our schooling. We learn the various techniques. We ourselves, especially like when we were training for EMDR or the heart model, which is another type of model for the believers. That's a special model that was developed to bring Christ into the believer's life to help them with their trauma.
Wow.
Definitely, are trying to utilize all the skills that we have learned. And as well, we have to go through ourselves in order to know what we are, we experience what we know we're going to be giving to our clients.
Okay, all right. So before we get into the 4 R's, make sure we have another question. I want to talk about kids.
Oh, thank you.
Kids, teenagers, even young adults who lose a parent early in life, suffer trauma in life, whether that's through an abusive situation or in a lot of Black communities, suffer with PTSD because of the environment.
Right.
Not necessarily in the home, but the neighborhood environment. How do we help kids who are grieving?
Okay.
So
there are support groups in town that are specifically for kids that have lost parents. For those who are grieving, and we have such an increase of sexual assaults among children. So for me as a trauma therapist, and I do extra work specializing in children. I worked for 3 years with a caseload of children, about 176 children on my caseload. And I was doing trauma work with them to help them through their process of grief. Grief therapy, trauma therapy with what's called TFCBT, and it's trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy. So TFCBT for children.
Okay.
Then have the TFCBT for teens.
Okay.
And then there is the ARC process, which, of course, I did specialized training for that. ARC is for those traumatic events, those losses, children who are dysregulated, children in the midst of divorces become collateral damage that get pushed off to the side. And so they suffer, and then when they go to school, we wonder why, the child is throwing tantrums or throwing things or, bullying other kids. They are expressing, all of that anger, that sadness. So children, it's very important. No matter what the age, we started at ages 6, but I've been doing specialized work for the last 2 years on children 0 to 5.
Gotcha.
Because even in the womb, children who are a mother who is carrying a child and there is domestic violence, that child feels the emotions.
Right.
So therefore, when they're born, they may be, come out and they're crying all the time. Well, even they need therapy. And it's usually on the form of play therapy. There is someone licensed for play therapy.
Play therapy.
Because if they're at an age that they can't speak, we need a way for them to play out that. So children are very important. And that's called CPP. Child Parent Psychotherapy for ages 0 to 5. And so children are very near and dear to my heart.
Gotcha.
I love that a parent who feels the need to go ahead and let them have, therapy or see a licensed professional counselor.
Maybe they should have play therapy for some adults too.
We do.
You do?
We have play therapy transitions.
Are you serious?
Yes. And it's in a different context, and I actually engage clients when I'm teaching those relaxation skills. It is a kind of play therapy for adults.
Watch out now. Okay.
Yep.
Doc, you're just making it harder to go back to your church. I'm just telling you now. So let's talk about these 4 R's.
Okay.
And resilience.
Yes.
Restoration, recovery, and I'm missing one.
So we've got resilience, we've got recovery, restoration.
Let's put it on the screen.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, resilience. We'll start resilience first.
So we'll start with that. Yeah, resilience. When I started at the very beginning, we talked about the inner skill sets that we all have.
Right.
We are stronger than we believe. And sometimes when we are caught off guard, and we need someone to walk alongside of us, I go from a strength-based approach.
Right.
I go from, what are your inner strengths? What would people say that are your stronger characteristics? And we draw from that so that the person then, reframes how they're looking at it from the sadness part to how they're really strong. How can we pull on that and show you that you are able to then walk into the next one of recovery. So there's the resilience being, we've been given a certain skill set, but what we fail to believe is that we've been made more than conquerors.
Right.
And so therefore, if I have to draw on that faith, if I have to draw on those promises, you are not alone in this walk.
Next one is restoration.
Resolution
is the last one.
Okay, resolution.
Yep.
Okay, so restoration. things will not go back to normal, because
Okay.
what's normal anyway? But it will be that, you are able to lie down at night beside still waters. I love Psalms 23 because he does restore our soul even in the midst of grief and sadness. And so restoration is part of that process. It takes time. We can't rush it. We can't have a microwave moment that we move ourselves through mourning. So no microwave moments in order to get us through. But it is truly going through that process to get to restoration where, we don't see things in the negative, but we see a better day.
That leads to recovery.
Yes, recovery.
Okay.
So I always try to go from a total health and wellness perspective. So when someone comes in, it's not just how you're doing mentally,
Okay.
but it is physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. I need to know that all of your areas are balanced, because, if your mental health is off, guess what? Eventually, if we've got stress or we've got depression, then it's going to bring on other physical symptoms.
Okay.
And so therefore, emotionally, I'm not going to be balanced because I'm so sad. Socially, if I'm not connecting with individuals, we are social creatures. We were designed that way by God. When we don't interact with people, we stop growing, we stop learning. That is why children who interact with each other start to learn vocabulary.
Right.
They learn new things.
Right.
As adults, we should not stop learning and growing. We need to connect with other people in order to continue to learn about ourselves, using other people as a reflection. Oh, okay, I can, develop more social skills.
Right.
I feel kind of awkward in this situation, but, they accepted me. Or does this group of individuals, interact with each other? We're always watching.
Okay.
And always learning. So recovery, is definitely one of those things that we just need to yield to the process and go through the steps.
Okay. And then resolution.
Resolution. So I love when we resolve in our minds that we are not just saying verbally that I'm okay, but that I feel the way that I'm speaking.
Okay.
Oftentimes they'll say, call those things that be not as though they were. And yes, you can do that, but you're also going to have to do the process so that we resolve that I know that person is no longer here, or that my parents are no longer going to get back together, or that I can't find that beloved, valuable item that I lost, but that, you know what? If I keep my hands closed and I disconnect, I don't move forward to see that I might recover something else that's much better.
Gotcha.
A person who's resolved knows that I'm just going to keep walking it out until I, can see that I'm receiving more
Right. Okay.
than the pain that I carried the other day. And I want everyone to give themselves a pat on the back at where you came from.
Right.
Because oftentimes we don't do that.
Okay.
We do not look back and say, how far I was this time 6 months ago?
Right.
I'm not in that same place.
Okay. Questions, 901-930-6215. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can simply put something in the chat, and my wife will make sure that we get the question. We want to, as we're getting ready to wrap up here in a moment, but we want to make sure that you have every opportunity to answer, get a question answered. 901-930-6215. Or in the Facebook, simply put in your question, and First Lady will make sure that we get it. All right, what about some self-care help tips?
All
Christian self-help.
Christian self-help tips. I say Christian, I mean, there are all kinds of things. We definitely don't want the negative coping skills of the drinking or, taking prescription drugs that are not ours. But for the Christian, I need us to definitely, sleep is vital. It is very important, not just because, I'm going to be tired the next day, but because it allows our bodies to reset. When we go into that REM sleep, our bodies reset, and we need that. We need an adequate amount of sleep, and everyone is different. Not everyone needs 8 hours of sleep. You just have to know that, I'm sleeping enough. My body feels recharged. I'm able to wake up.
Okay.
So then we want to, connect with other people. Oftentimes we neglect trying to find our tribe and connect. So if we are believers, then we connect with others so that we can be encouraged and exhort each other. That builds us up inside. So if I was feeling down about a certain incident that happened, then I can, my friend or the person that I connected with will help me, to see that I can move forward, and it's okay. Take that trip. Do something for yourself. We're always helping everyone else, and we leave ourselves out.
Right.
And I told them there are all kinds of
and we can read the list.
All kinds of things we can do, but definitely what I've found is those devotionals.
Okay.
I love those.
Okay.
I love quotes, and so therefore, just stealing away. And we cannot be afraid of the silence when we're by ourselves.
Right.
We can't be afraid of the silence, but fill our minds up in those quiet times with something that's positive and something that's inspirational.
Okay.
And then reach out to people you haven't talked to in a while. Reconnect.
Right. Okay. We're going to put that list up, and I'm going to read through them right quick.
Okay.
These are 13 Christian self-care tips. One is be in the community. 2 is make time for God. Another one is be prayerful. Another one, a big one, is forgiving others. Practice journaling, writing things down. The next one is get some rest. Practice a good attitude. Nourish and exercise your body. Stop controlling. You might have to talk about that one. Stop controlling. Choose joy. Serve others. Think lovely thoughts. And sleep well. What's stop controlling? Can you touch on that one? Stop controlling.
Yes. We want to be in control. We want to know what's going to happen. Next. I'm gonna plan today. This is how it's gonna go. I don't know if you've ever had someone like that. This is how it's gonna go. That's a controlling person. Because for the best laid plans, I promise you, things will happen.
Right.
Technology will sometimes fail, and you're like, no, this is not supposed to happen. Or you plan something, and your kids, they don't want to go along with it, and you're like, no, this is how we're going to do it. Okay. If we just sometimes let go and relax, wanting to have everything our way and scripted. Okay. Then we can allow ourselves not to become overly anxious. Gotcha. Because that control will lead us into what if this fails? What if that stops? That worry will then spiral into anxiousness, which will spiral into anxiety.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. We penned interventions. And before we talk about the the support groups that everyone needs, here's my question. When you look at intervention today, it's almost described as this. I'm going to invite you. I'm going to use your husband. I'm going to invite Brother Williams. He spends too much time on the corner looking at the wall, just something crazy, right? But we're going to give him an intervention. So we're going to invite him to our house. We're going to have 20 people there. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he walks in the room, we're not going to let him leave until he gets help from stopping and staring at the wall. Is that the best practice for intervention, when you just bum rush somebody? Is it effective?
For mental health, that I do not
Okay.
Do not. That is the worst thing that we could do.
Right.
For those that, and I know in the substance abuse or use disorders, interventions have been utilized. When I say interventions, I truly mean that there are techniques that are data-based
Okay.
that help us to help our clients.
Gotcha.
So they're called modalities, interventions, or the treatments that you utilize, when you're helping someone.
Gotcha.
So there is a difference. I'm glad you brought that up, because definitely we are not going to, go into someone who is, definitely, struggling with a mental health issue. And what is important is for us, if we will go to the doctor for high blood pressure, diabetes, any of the other physical disorders,
right.
our mental health is equally as important. And I say equally because one drives the other.
Right.
And therefore, we need to let the person know this would be good for you. I think that, the same way that we would check out with our PCP, we can check out a licensed professional counselor.
PCP?
Yes.
The drug?
Primary
Oh,
care provider.
I was like, Doc, you threw me there. You said PCP.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes,
I forgot you.
It's our provider, and we do use acronyms all the time. So
I'm a civilian. I don't know your world like that. Okay,
yes,
I got you.
It is our primary care provider, which is whether a pediatrician for the kids or the adult doctor, internal medicine. That's right. You got to make it trip. Got to make it plain.
Right.
Since we were talking about interventions before.
Amen. We have another question. Can you grieve too long?
Grief can, if left unchecked and not taken care of, and they've grieved a long time. If you saw the video at the very beginning, our bodies begin to take on all the release of the cortisol, which starts to break down our bodies.
Right,
and have you ever heard where someone grieved themselves to death?
Yep.
I mean, our bodies react
Respond
accordingly.
to that. Yeah.
Yes. But what is too long for one person, but we just have to make sure we stay close as those support people.
Right.
And say, that's not looking good. Remember those signs that I told you. If they are literally not taking care of themselves, no longer, want to get out of bed, don't have an interest in anything, they sleep all the time, they want to stay in the dark, they don't want to talk to anyone, they feel hopeless, or they verbalize that, I might as well go on too, that they need professional help.
Very good. So let's talk about support groups. We have a list.
Yes.
We can put the list up. These support systems are important, and I'll read the list right quick, and then you can. Support systems are a church, faith-based organization. We have family. We have friends. We have social community organization, support groups, therapist, counselor.
Yes.
Now, why are these support systems so important in the process of being healed?
Well, each and every one of these systems helps us to stay connected, grounded. It reminds us and pulls us into the present as social creatures that we belong.
Right.
I mean, if it makes us feel as if we are a part of, if it's just a couple of those or three of those, it helps our total well-being to stay connected with groups so that we're reaching out. And there are people there who are noticing, hey, is everything okay? Even if you just kind of text and know, is everything okay? Do you need to talk? They feel as if someone is there.
Right. That's good to know. So Doc, as we're looking at here, let's put some resources up here. And there are some folk also who would like to know how can they get in touch with you. So, we have another question. Let's answer the question. Has the pandemic affected our collective grieving? Is it harder for people to lose loved ones when they're prevented from seeing them, as in the case of COVID lockdown?
Our numbers have dramatically increased. Our team, just because, just in this year, we've done a little over 4,700 individuals. COVID has affected families, those who are, have lost loved ones, those who have actually had COVID and recovered and are still grieving because they are not back to where they were. So it's hard enough grieving. It's harder now because we don't have that sense of closure. It's when I can't even see the person. I can't be there with them. I can't hold their hand. I would have been able to talk to them. Maybe I could have. And so that makes us have those feelings of guilt.
Wow.
And that in turn is making them feel like, I didn't get to say goodbye.
Right. Wow. That's a very good question.
That was a good question.
A very good question. We want to put up some contact information of support services. We're going to put those on the screen. We're going to read them to you as well. So if you can, support services. Psychology Today is a grief support group. Grief Share at local facilities here in Memphis. We have a camp called Camp Good Grief for Kids. Excellent, I'm told. Then you have Kimmons Wilson Family Center for Good Grief. I'm going to say this right, Mila's
Yes.
House.
Yes, Mila's House.
That's at 326 Ellsworth, and that number is 901-861-5656. Then we have Crossroad Hospice.
Yes.
Which is with you, Dr. Williams. Is that correct?
No,
I can't see that. It says
but
contact.
they have a.
Oh,
grief
Cheryl
service.
Williams. I'm sorry. Is the contact, and that number is 901-495-2553.
Thank you again for watching us for this rebroadcast of Resilience and Recovery. It was a great Friday Night Live, and we know that it was a blessing for all those who were watching. And so, as we take this time just to think about what was said then, just remember, I know Hezekiah Walker has a song that says, I need you, you need me. We are all a part of God's body. And if we're all a part of God's body, then we have to look after one another and make sure that during these times, when people have lost loved ones, when people are going through seasonal depression, that we are there for them, that their church family knows that we love you and we care. Again, don't forget, tomorrow, our Isaiah 58 Sabbath, we're going out to feed some people, clothe some people, hitting our police and fire stations, perhaps track attack, and all those things you'll hear about more on tomorrow. So join us for that. But for now, we say thank you for joining us. God bless.